there you go. Now you don't need to watch the whole thing. You just pause it and look at it this way. But that wouldn't be too much fun. Hello, I'm Notes. And seeing as it's my birthday weekend, I pretty much did a full-scale splurge and got all these. So I'm going to go through each one with you guys. So first up, I got the Moody Blues, The Days of Future Past. I really love Nights in White Satin. It's one of my favorite songs. There's just a lot of emotion through that, and I really like the Moody Blues. No relation to the X-Men movie, but it is a very good album. Great listen. I can't wait to really put this on the turntable. Next up, I found a used copy of Pink Floyd's Momentary Lapse of Reason. This album is kind of a hit and miss. It's kind of basically just a Gilmour solo album featuring Nick Mason. Richard White makes a little bit of an appearance, but this was really marketed as kind of a duo. Richard does have some credit on this album, but it's not, his presence isn't really felt like it was in Division Bell or even past Floyd albums. Once Roger Waters left the band, he felt like using the name Pink Floyd was a kind of like an insult to him. Now, of course, years have gone by and they've buried the hatchet and they're all still fine with it. But what we're left with is a very strange Gilmour sounding Pink Floyd album. This still, I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff on here. People kind of overlook it, especially with that last song, Sorrow. Again, a lot of the songs on this album are very radio friendly, but I really love the guitar work on this album, and you kind of have to. That's where this album really shines. So I kind of picked it up because right now I'm trying to collect all of the Floyd albums. There's a few that I don't have yet, but this helps round it off. So Momentary Lapse of Reason, it's a good Floyd album. Next up, I got two Mike Oldfield albums. I really love Mike Oldfield, and I think because Tubular Bells is such a Goliath, a lot of his other works are kind of overlooked. And the first one is Hardest Ridge. This is the one that came out right after Tubular Bells and just before Omadon, and I love Omadon. So this one has a really good kind of climax in that first song. A lot of great sounds, a lot of sounds that had never been heard before. So I love how this album sounds. It's a really good addition. And the other one that I picked up was 5 Miles Out, a much later album. The first side is all one song, and it really shows what Mike Oldfield is able to do with sound. I really enjoyed this one. The second side is more of like his poppy albums, where I feel like a lot of Mike Oldfield's stuff is either one or the other. It's either straight up progressive, straight up experimentation, or the album is just radio friendly, very easy listening, very like adult contemporary. But I feel like this album was a really good kind of balance between his two minds. So I had to pick up both of these albums. They were at the record shop. It was one of those 2-for-1 days. So it was really good. And you can also kind of see how one of the songs are laid out on the gatefold there. Very, very cool. So yeah, both great albums. Again, not quite as up to snuff as, say, Tubular Bells or Omadon, but great listens nonetheless. So those were all kind of like the used pile, bargain bin albums. The rest up are all new stuff or relatively new. So let's just dive right into those. First up, I had to pick up Joel Plaskett's The Park Avenue Sobriety Test. I really liked the album. I reviewed it, so you can check it out over here. I felt like this was some of his best work to date. And I really like all the Easter eggs that you see kind of down on the album here. I mean, we've got Ashtray Rock over on this side. It's really hard to record when it's in mirror image here, but anyway, we have Ashtray Rock, we have Scrappy Happiness down here, if you can see them there. You kind of have like the blanket from 3 here as well as the Truthfully. So a lot of really good Easter eggs, and I love all of the Polaroid pictures that are all throughout here. And it's even got a really cool gatefold. Just hit myself. Anyway, really good gatefold. Again, I really enjoy this album, and I love the fact that it's all contained on one album, so I only really have to do one flip. Kind of brings me back to, listening to albums when I'm a kid, and you just have to flip it once. And then it provides you with a good 25 minutes worth of music. So, great album. I like picking it up. You should definitely give it a spin. Next one is a much more popular album and kind of has a really strange place in my record library, but I picked up the Foo Fighters' Sonic Highways. I love the concept that they recorded each song in a different location, and they did a really fantastic documentary about this. I mean, you can find it all online. So my roommate actually saw them here in Toronto about a month ago, and so she's been listening to all the songs since then, and it got into my head and I had to listen to it. I love I Am a River. Too many good songs on this album to pass up. I've kind of been a quasi-fan of the Foo Fighters for the longest time. My favorite song from them was actually off the Godzilla soundtrack, A3020. I always felt like that was a masterpiece of its time, and yet they never released it on an actual album. So picking up Sonic Highways is kind of like my justification of liking that song. It's like, well, I actually do own an album from them now, so there's that. So again, great album. I might review it, but I think I've kind of missed the boat with that. So yeah. The other two I had to specifically order. I couldn't find them in a store, but they're both gazpacho albums. The first one is The March of Ghosts, the precursor to Demon, which I fell in love with. Yeah, I really like a lot of the sounds they develop on this album. Not necessarily like the actual songs themselves or the overall album, but I love a lot of that sound that they're able to develop. And that one song, what was it? Mary Celeste? It's a fantastic song and one of their best. So when I saw that the store had this to order in, I made them order it. And likewise, I got them to order arguably my favorite album from the band, TikTok. This is a straight up masterpiece. There really isn't any way to describe it. It's one of those few albums that I just never get tired of listening to. So I had to pick it up. I love how this album is divvied up on each side. It's a really good listen, a really good pace, and I love how they used the second side that was blank. I mean, that is just beautiful by itself. So March of Ghosts also has it. Oh, there we go. It's actually more like this. I was holding it the wrong way. There we go. Anyway, that's this side. I think they did the best they could do in terms of structuring these albums. With March of Ghosts, it feels like the middle is that second side. So I'm glad that they didn't just stop it off at like the 15-minute mark and really chop up the album. It feels more natural. And if you thought Foo Fighters was a little bit of a deviation, the next two are as far out as you can get. I got Weird Al, Alpocalypse, and Mandatory Fun. I found these guys at one of my favorite record stores, and I couldn't say no. They were very reasonably priced, and I love Weird Al. This is one of my favorite artists, and having him on vinyl just felt right. I mean, this isn't quite that sophisticated albums that we're used to listening to on vinyl to really get the minute sounds. It's just fun. So owning them on vinyl is a little bit strange, and I must admit, Alpocalypse isn't a fantastic album. A lot of the original songs on here are just great. I mean, CNR is a great homage to the White Stripes. I don't like the White Stripes, but I love TNR. And I specifically like Ringtone is a great homage to Queen. Craigslist is a great spoof on the Doors. But really the standout track for me is Skipper Dan, which is basically just a Weezer song without actually being a Weezer song. It's great. So these guys are a great pickup for me. Now this one should come as no surprise to you. You've already seen it. Coma Eclectic by Between the Buried and Me. The more I listen to this album, the more I love it. The more painting it does. It's one of those albums that really grows on you. I know a lot of people are kind of disappointed with that shift in sound of it being not as brutal, but I feel like the fans that they're getting because of this far outweighs that, so I embrace the change. And I love the artwork in this. I mean, just take a look at that. It really does a great job of showing what the music that we're into is. So great pickup, I recommend it. Do yourself a favor and pick it up. And we're not done yet. No, another amazing album is Stephen Hackett's Wolflight. Again, I've reviewed this album, you can take a look at that, but this, it keeps surprising me. The more I listen to it, the more it just reveals itself to me. And I love cranking the tunes and really getting into a lot of the sounds on this album. Steve has really outdone himself, and he's really shown that he's not slowing down even because of his age. And in fact, it's kind of like a good red wine. The more you listen to it, the more mature it really tastes, and it's a really fantastic album. I love dimming the lights, I love putting the needle down and just enjoying all the sounds that it has. Rounding off this whole escapade of just over the top, way too many albums, I couldn't say no when I saw this in the record store. This was one of those albums where I don't care how much it is, I am picking it up. Fear of a Blank Planet by Porcupine Tree. Arguably the best album the band has ever put out, and I would say one of the best pieces of music that Steven Wilson has ever written, and that's saying quite a lot. And I love how they basically include all of Neil recurring on this album as well. You're not just picking up Fear of a Bleak Planet, you're also picking up Neil recurring. And because both of those albums were recorded at pretty much the exact same time, it feels natural. It feels like this was how the album was supposed to sound. And I love everything about this album. Like, look at the gatefold in this. That really paints the picture of what the concept of this album is. And it's one of my favorite albums, and again, arguably Porcupine Tree's best album. So when I saw this in the store, I had to pick it up. There was no way I was leaving without it. And I am very glad I did. So this is an amazing album, and just the guest appearances too. I mean, not only do you have Robert Fripp on this album, but you also have Alex Lifeson from Rush, and his influence on Anesthesia Eyes is just brilliant. And again, it never feels out of place. It just enhances the enjoyment of the album as a whole. So great find. So glad I picked it up. And that is about it for my big splurge. And I'm kind of glad that I stopped where I did, because that was a lot. But again, I couldn't say no to any of these. And it wasn't like I just went to the record store and picked up all those. This was an accumulation of a couple of months' work. So anyway, those were all the albums I picked up. What were your favorites that you saw? Which ones do you want me to review that I haven't? Let me know, comment below. And that's it. All right, notes out.